On February 1st, 2021, Social Justice Bermuda issued a press statement calling for an end of collective worship in schools, as it is a breach of students' freedoms of religion and beliefs. Schools should be institutions that are respectful and inclusive of all students, regardless of their religious beliefs or non-beliefs. The Human Rights Commission has received complaints, and they concluded that the current religious practices in schools are a violation of human rights. Our statement offered the following alternatives to collective worship: school assemblies, time for reflection, personal reflection, and extracurricular organized worship. The Minister of Education declined to comment on the subject until now.
So regarding the issue of collective worship in schools, now the law states that it's mandatory for all public schools to hold collective worship. Do you support this policy?
Yes, I do.
You fully support it?
I support the legislation as it's been written, and I believe that it covers all of the issues that have been mentioned here recently in the press. I also recognize that the legislation does provide a option for any parent to exclude their child from the collective worship.
Excluding students from collective worship others that student from the rest of their peers. It often excludes them from assemblies where, as this former educator points out, they will miss school celebrations, rewards, and announcements. As the law stands, the Minister of Education himself must be notified if parents wish to have their children excused, and the minister must be satisfied that the students are worshiping elsewhere instead. Additionally, as Social Justice Bermuda pointed out, at one Bermuda Public School, there are up to 4 prayers a day over a PA system, during which students are expected to stand at attention or possibly receive disciplinary action. These prayers over the PA system interrupt lesson time. Have a listen. How can a parent opt out of this for their child when it is broadcast throughout the entire building?
Stand and be silent for the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven.
We're probably all familiar with that one, so let's see how another prayer broadcast over the PA system ended.
Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. To the grace of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all, now and forevermore. Amen.
And I also recognize that the legislation states explicitly that collective worship shall not be distinctive in any particular religious group.
Right.
The collective worship found in Bermuda's public school system is overtly Christian. When we call for the removal of compulsory worship in the public schools, we mean regular assemblies like these, which are mandatory to attend.
I believe what the Bible says. So right now we're going to pray. Dear Lord, I know I'm a sinner. I know that you sent your Son to die for me. And I know that without him, I could not be with you in heaven. So Lord, I want to acknowledge that I sinned and that punishment was taken on by Jesus. And I believe today that you sent your Son to die for me and take on my punishment. Lord, I accept and believe what you did for me.
And our schools have the autonomy, our leaders in our schools have the autonomy to exercise and be within the limits of that legislation as they choose.
Here's some feedback from our school leaders in a recent Zoom staff meeting where Social Justice Bermuda's statement was discussed.
When prayer is pushed out, what do we let in?
It is the time when we love the creature more than the creator. Our whole duty is to worship God. Prayer is how we communicate with him.
Serpents are the most crafty of all beasts. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Woe to those looking to remove prayer from school.
Well, according to Social Justice Bermuda, prayers are overtly Christian. They're focused in Jesus' name and include the Lord's Prayer. And according to Social Justice Bermuda, these practices of forced religious worship are unacceptable in the 21st century liberal democracy. You don't agree with that at all?
What I will say is, if there is an issue with collective worship, we will listen to our parents, we will listen to our students, and they are free to make contact with me at the ministry and the department if they have any issues.
But you don't have any issues with it at all? No.
Social Justice Bermuda is a non-hierarchical collective of Bermudians that includes parents, educators, and former students of the Bermuda Public School System. We are an advocacy group with no political affiliation. While some of our members have publicly identified themselves, others choose to contribute anonymously. There is no official leader of the group. Our platform was released in September 2020, and in it, we called on the Ministry of Education to ensure the public school system was secular and inclusive of all religions. The decision to include this was based on the personal experiences of some of our members, family, and friends who are currently engaged in the Bermuda Public School System. Since launching this campaign, many in the community have come forward to share their stories. Here are just a few, and others will be found on Social Justice Bermuda's channels.
When my son was in P1, he was excluded from the class Christmas play. We had allowed him to participate in the play during preschool because we were assured that it was festive but not religious. Not exactly true, but that's another story. And we didn't want him to feel left out. We didn't even know about the play in P1 until he had already been excluded from the practices in school because the teacher knew that our family is not Christian.
The reason why I dislike school prayers, and we can fix them by not basing the prayers on any one religion or having a moment of silence. A, it's usually pointed or directed to only one singular religion, not multiple. B, the fact that the staff, mainly teachers or forces, tell all students to stand and pray, regardless of their religious choice. C, the fact that it looks as if they are suggesting that the religion of their choice is more superior to others.
This is so important. I was bullied by students and teachers. I was allowed not to pray, but still had to stand with my head bowed and eyes closed. So they were saying, as long as it looked like I was praying, it's okay. I was sent to the principal multiple times over it, and she was not particularly nice over the whole day.
The reason why I do not like the school prayer is because staff make us stand up and say the prayer even though we have different religions. I feel like we should have silent time instead so that everyone can pray equally and in their own way. One time I stood, but I didn't really pray, and a teacher said, "So what, you don't believe in God?" And I was raised Muslim, so I said, "Not Jesus." And the teacher kept questioning me and then told me that I should be going to church.
What about the fact that the United Nations Committee on the Rights of Children has also called for it to be abolished?
As I said, if there is an issue at any of our schools, they are free to make contact with the Department of Education to express their issues.
Are you aware of the human rights, United Nations Rights of the Child?
As I said, any school or any parent that has issues with the legislation as it's written are free to make contact with the Department of Education and express that. And we will deal with that from the persons who attend the school.
We at Social Justice Bermuda do have an issue with the legislation as it is written, which is why we issued the press statement. The United Nations Committee on the Rights of Children has called for collective worship to be repealed, as it is a breach of the rights of children. SJB agrees and calls on Bermuda to be progressive in the service of its children.
And I wish to make it known that bullying will not be tolerated, regardless of what the genesis of that bullying is. And so I would really appreciate the Royal Gazette to really talk about what that bullying is, so we can address that.
I think you addressed it last week, Minister, and we ran a story on it last week.
I addressed it because the Royal Gazette wouldn't address it, and I'm asking
you to address it. We ran a story, I believe it was on the front page, actually.
I'm asking you to address it.
Well, we have done.
Address it.
You've addressed it, and we reported on what you said.
Let's talk about what the real crux of the issue is, and that is we will not accept bullying in our schools, regardless of where it comes from.
That is not the crux of the issue. The crux of the issue is that the United Nations Human Rights Commission
Thank you,
has said
Gareth.
that.
You can move to your next question.
While we do applaud the minister standing against bullying, unfortunately, his statement fell short of doing anything to stop the crux of this issue, which is coercive collective worship. Instead, his statement legitimized the isolation of our students if they do not fit into the status quo and allowed administrators to impose their personal religious values upon young people. Schools should be safe places for our children, and this form of oppression, however cloaked, must be removed.
Why have you repeatedly refused to comment on this up until today?
I've already given my statement on it, and that is to address the bullying.
You did not give your statement on it,
Gareth,
Minister.
I
My
addressed
questions
the bullying,
were,
and that is the crux of the issue.
I've been asking questions on this for 17 days. And I've been told repeatedly that you're not going to comment.
You have not, been told anything about anybody repeatedly commenting. We have commented, and that was to address the bullying.
You have not commented on these questions.
That's the end
Why
of
is
your
it the end
questions.
Is there a limit on the questions?
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Why is there a limit on questions?
We'll be wrapping up. Any other questions from the media? All right. Thank you very much for attending today's press conference.
Social Justice Bermuda remains committed to advocating and organizing on a number of different issues. You can see our full platform on our website, but here are just a few of the projects we are tackling. Our criminal justice team is preparing a policy paper, which will address the woeful legal aid system, the lack of mental health support for persons experiencing incarceration, and other issues that disproportionately impact Black Bermudians. Our Cannabis Reform Task Force has been working to address the gaps in the proposed legislation and ensure it is reparational. Members of our education team are involved in the current schools redesign process. Our healthcare team has been looking at the lack of access to fresh, healthy food and has prepared a community resource to help people grow their own. The Economic Equity team is launching more advocacy around salary transparency and immigration reform. Additionally, we have connected with community groups who are already doing work in areas including gang violence, domestic violence, and poverty to see how we can best support their work. We are currently running 2 urgent campaigns, one to remove police officer Barbie Bishop and the other to remove One Bermuda Alliance Senator Marcus Jones. You can learn more about these campaigns on our website. And as it relates to the issue of collective worship in Bermuda's public schools, we will continue to raise awareness and advocate for the change in law, which will create a more inclusive environment for young Bermudians. We encourage you to make your voice heard, and if you wish to remain anonymous, please contact us. And if our work interests you, we invite you to get involved.